This is a 2006 Chevy Trailblazer SS. This was an awesome truck in its day, and it still is today. This truck came with a 6-liter LS2 engine with it had 4-wheel drive. It used a 4L60 transmission, which we don't really care too much for, but the engine and the transfer case were pretty cool. This truck specifically has had the 4-wheel drive deleted, and it only has a tail shaft put on the back of the transmission, so it's just a rear-wheel drive. And the LS2 had a hot cam applied, and the hot cam and the motor had let go. The cam and the valve train looked good, but upon pulling out the 8 spark plugs, we just see everything is cool and fouled, and there is a crack in the driver's side of the engine block. So we know the bottom end let go without the top end coming apart. We suspect that the motor hydro-locked and flooded out a cylinder, but we haven't gotten the part yet, so we're working on that. And that's what we're doing. All right. And here we're gonna drain the oil. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, straight cooling. Getting the motor out of this truck is a real thing. This is a automatic transmission. It's the 4L60E, and the 6-liter engine has it's locked up. We've pulled out all 8 of the spark plugs, and it's not hydro locked. The bottom end fell apart and it is mechanically locked. There must be a connecting rod that's bent or in an extreme bind, and we cannot rotate the crank at all in either direction. And what that means is we have no way to spin the motor to unbolt the torque converter. So we're tearing down the motor enough to where we can create enough room in front of the motor to pull the torque converter out of the transmission attached to the engine, and then pull it all up as an assembly, and we'll get the torque converter unbolted after the motor's pulled out. And for that, we're pretty much there right now. We still got to unbolt the manifold, the headers, and get our lift plate put on the intake, and we should be pulling it out pretty soon. This is pretty much how much teardown we're going to do before we pull the motor. Again, we still have to take off the exhaust manifolds. We're probably going to unbolt the AC compressor. We'll probably remove the compressor, and we might even remove the radiator. But we've completely stripped the face of the motor, the water pump, the harmonic balancer, the main bracket with the power steering pump and the alternator. All that needs to come off so that we have the entire depth of the torque converter with the input shaft to slide forward before we start coming up. And when it comes up, it's going to come up at an angle because of all the weight on the back side of the motor. The lift plate we use does have 3 different holes, and I guess we could try to go to the hole in the back so it's a little bit more balanced, but it is what it is. Anyway, let's get back to it. The Trailblazer SS is a very small, compact little SUV for the 4-wheel drive it has and the V8. The way it gets all this to fit in place is the front axle actually passes through the oil pan. So for anybody who's ever seen a Trailblazer SS oil pan, there's a big hole in the front of it that passes through the side of it. And here is one axle on the driver's side, and the passenger side is over here behind the AC compressor. At a minimum, both front wheels have to be broken down, the upper ball joints have to be broken down, and so we can remove the CV half shafts and then have room to undo the motor mounts, pull the motor mounts out, and then we can pull the motor out. Or I think if we wanted to, we could even break the axle parts down inside the car and get the front axle pieces off of the oil pan. But we have to break down the wheels and get the CV shafts out first, and that's what we're doing. All right. Right now we are going underneath the car. We're on the driver's side, just behind the front wheel. And we'll come down and under. There's the frame, there's the bell housing. And this is the driver's side of the block, just above the front axle input, or drive shaft input, behind the front axle. And here's the side of the block, just behind the motor mount. That's the main oil gallery that runs from the front, where the oil pump is, all the way to the back where the oil filter would be on most LS engines, but not on this one. And there is our hole. Look at that. Huge crack in the gallery. Bam. So that's why this engine's coming out. Here we are getting ready to bolt our lift plate to the valley cover. It'll go on just like that. But before we bolt that down, take a look at what we found in the valley. You guys see that? 1, 2. You see these? Little chunks of this looks like block meat. It's aluminum, but this had to be thrown up from the crank spinning or something, because it's there's nothing up top that's let go. It's only the side of the block that's blown out. So it'll be really interesting to get this apart, or get the motor out on a stand and get the oil pan off and see what kind of damage is underneath. It's gonna be pretty bad. Anyway. Time to bolt the lift plate down. Start getting the motor unbolted from the transmission. Alright, we are about ready to pull our motor out. One of the last things that we have to deal with before we can pull the engine out of the Trailblazer SS is we have to get the front axle apart. The front axle is made up of 3 different main components. It has a carrier, which is where the front, or where the drive shaft connects to. And then it has this, this little shaft, cross shaft. And then on the passenger side, we have this piece right here that is called an actuator, a front axle disconnect actuator, I think is the correct name of it. The actuator comes right off. There's just 3 or 4 bolts that hold it to the oil pan, and then it plugs right onto the shaft like this. It unbolts and comes forward, and it's so small that it just falls right off. You don't have to have anything out of the way or moved. It just comes right off. And then the shaft should just wiggle right on out. And these 2 pieces are out of your hair without any real effort. They just come right apart. The carrier, however, is a pretty big piece, right? And it needs room to come out. We can. I'm probably going to remove it as we're pulling the engine out. This way I'll have the engine up off the motor mounts, we'll pull it off to the side. Another way that we could go about doing this if we really wanted to is we could unbolt the 2 motor mount perches from the frame, and then we'd probably have all the room in the world just to pull the whole engine with the carrier attached up and out. But to get to the bolts that hold the motor mount perches to the frame, you got to break down the front shocks and get those out of the way and get the springs out of the way. And for us, we just want to make the engine lightweight anyway. I love trying to unload the cherry picker as much as I can, you know, safety first and stuff. And so that's what we're doing. Motor's about to come out. Well, it's time. Engine and converter coming out together. thought this was supposed to have a stall converter in it. It doesn't look like a small body converter. Oh, this is going to be such a mess. And there we are. Motor and converter out together. $22, $22, $11. I'll bring it back down a little bit. I don't really see any more damage to the block aside from just that one part where the oil gallery is. Oh no. Let me get it on a stand, I'll show you the rest.